There have been fundamental failings on the left. For instance, the border, having an open border.
There's no open border, Francis. Where's the open border?
Well, Trump has closed it, but before there was an open border.
It wasn't. What's your definition of an open border?
Well, you look...
Millions of illegals coming in.
That doesn't mean it's open. That just means they managed to come in illegally.
If millions of people are able to walk into my house and I say, I've got an open door policy to my house, you go, that's not an open door policy. It just means people got in. I mean, come on.
No, I'm being very serious. If you want to use your house analogy, if you opened your house door and said, everyone come in, no, I'm not going to stop you, then fine, that is an open door policy. If people come into your house in the window in the middle of the night while you're calling the police...
That you left open.
Well, did they leave open?
Well, clearly, because the moment Donald Trump was elected, he closed the window.
Well, he closed it completely, which is ridiculous because now you can't even claim...
What's up, everybody? Jackson here, and this one is a genuine slugfest. Mehdi Hasan going up against Konstantin, Kisin, and Francis Foster on their own show, and it does not go the way they probably expected. Two big topics get hashed out here. First, whether the US border was ever actually open in any meaningful sense, with Mehdi pushing back hard on that framing, using a house door analogy that's honestly pretty effective. And second, the much thornier question of foreign lobbying influence on American politics, specifically around Israel, where Mehdi makes the case that there's a real, quantifiable lobby effect that gets treated differently than every other lobby in Washington because of how sensitive the topic is. I want to break down where Mehdi's points hold up under scrutiny and where the pushback from Kisin and Foster is actually fair. Stick with me. Get that like in, get subscribed, because we go point by point on stuff like this. Now let's get into it.
To manipulate the United States into doing what
and they've been doing it well under Trump.
Well, but
he's easily manipulated.
Russia wants him to make it easier for them in Ukraine.
Yes.
Ukraine wants it to make it easier for them to defeat Russia. China spends huge amounts of money shaping US foreign policy if it can. So does Qatar, so do lots of countries. So I guess the thing that I'm trying to get to the bottom of, because it's such a big talking point in the US right now, is what is the supposed mechanism by which this tiny country of Israel has this outsized power over the president of the United States?
So a couple of things. One is, it's not mutually exclusive, is it, Konstantin, to say that Donald Trump has responsibility. He's a grown man. He may not act like a grown man, but is a grown man and has to take responsibility for decisions he makes. That's not mutually exclusive with saying, but the Israelis also tricked him, manipulated him, lobbied him, bullied him, pressured him. Both of those things can be true at the same time.
All I'm asking is, what is the mechanism
so let's come
by
to that.
which
But we
that
accept that both those things can be true.
Of course,
So now we come to what is the Israelis doing. You would accept that, you just listed a bunch of countries, and the Gulf, the Qataris have a lot of influence, the Emiratis have a lot of influence, the Russians, sadly, have a lot of influence with Trump. You would accept that none of those countries come close to Israel's influence. I don't think there's any question mark about Israel's influence on American policies. The question you're asking about is how.
What's the mechanism?
But no one would deny. I mean, you watched the Ted Cruz interview with Tucker Carlson that went viral not long ago. Cruz says, I came into politics to defend Israel. They don't say that about any other country. I've never heard an American senator say, I came into politics to defend Belgium. Never heard it. Never heard anyone talk about any other country the way...
Just to interject one more thing, if I may. That's not necessarily evidence of Israel having influence. It might well be a case of there are lots of people who live in America who believe, for whatever reason, for religious reasons or for geopolitical reasons, that this is a country with which America should have a close alliance.
So 100% I agree with you. There are Christian evangelicals in this country who believe that the rapture will happen when all the Jews are gathered in this place, and they are even more hardcore pro-Israel than a lot of pro-Israeli Jews. That's 100% true. But there are also a bunch of people in American politics. I know, I've met them, I've interviewed them. They tell me this on and off the record, who are supporting Israel because they're worried about being primaried. They're worried about losing their jobs. They're worried about being called anti-Semitic. They're worried about being targeted by AIPAC. They're worried about being targeted by their political opponents, et cetera, et cetera. The idea that there isn't a very, very powerful pro-Israel lobby is absurd. Just as there is a very powerful gun lobby, just as there's a very powerful farmer lobby, right? It's funny that when we in this city, people are happy to say, you're owned by the gun lobby. But for good reasons, because of anti-Semitic tropes, people don't want to say you're owned by the Israel lobby.
There's a good reason.
There is a good reason
of course.
But the fact is,
let me just
there is an Israel lobby that has massive oversized influence on American politics.
The distinction I'm trying to make, and I think it's an important one, and it's good that we're exploring this, which is, I think the reason people worry about calling it the Israeli lobby versus the gun lobby is the Israeli lobby implies some kind of foreign influence, right? Whereas the point that I think you and I are both making actually in agreement on is there are lots and lots of Americans who, for whatever reasons, their own personal reasons, view this as an important strategic alliance of the United States or a religious worldview or whatever. So, and I think that's where the distinction becomes difficult.
I think you're, in good faith, overstating the other part of the argument, maybe for argument's sake or devil's advocacy. All I'm saying is, let me give you one example. When you ask Democratic voters, do you support what Israel's doing in Gaza? 8%, according to one poll, said we support it. The
Democrats don't support it. Okay.
Vast majority don't support it. When you go look at Democrats in Congress, the vast majority do support it. There's an absolute disconnect. The numbers are reversed.
And why is that?
That's exactly my point. Why is that? It's not because they're all out for self-interest. It's because they're lobbied by various lobbies, the military-industrial complex, which also has interest in war. So I don't think this war is a solution to the problem. Oh, by the way, what is the problem? Donald Trump will not tell us what the goals of this war are. It changes every day. Marco Rubio says it's degrading the Navy. First they said it was a nuclear program that they obliterated last year in the 12-day war, apparently.
There's a lot of evidence that the nuclear material may well have been removed prior to this strike.
But I'm saying this war was not about the nuclear program because they've done nothing to...
Well, that's actually the thing that they have said that makes sense to me. Like, I think I'm actually kind of with you in terms of I don't understand what the goals of this thing are.
They don't either.
If we take it that the nuclear stuff and degrading the military, that's fine. But then why are you killing their leaders? That's the bit I don't understand.
Well, interestingly, they're not killing their leaders, right? They killed Khamenei, but the Israelis are doing much of the killing. They've killed the intelligence minister. They killed Ali Larijani. Now, let's just deal with what Israel wants, because what Israel wants is pretty clear to anyone watching. They want an unstable, weakened Iran that doesn't pose a threat to them. They don't care if it's a democracy. They don't care if it's a dictatorship. They don't care if it's civil war. They just want Iran off the table, right? And therefore, they're killing people who might do a deal with Trump. They've done this before. Last year in the 12-day war, they tried to kill a guy called Ali Shamkhani, who survived. Then they killed him now. He was a negotiator who Trump had been praising and reposting on social media. They killed him because they don't want Trump to do a deal with this guy.
Why not?
Because they don't want to negotiate a solution to this conflict. They want to keep going, the Israelis, until they wipe out everything they want to.
Yeah, they want to degrade Iran.
They don't want Donald Trump to do one of his deals. That's the worst thing they could have done. They didn't want the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal that Obama signed, that resolved the nuclear program for at least 15 years. They were dead against that deal.
But so was Trump himself.
Yes, and Trump pulled out of that deal. And then what happened? Enrichment went up. Then Biden came back in, said, let's try and go back into that deal. The Israelis attacked Natanz in 2021. They enriched up to 60%. Then last year, they went to Oman to negotiate. They had a meeting scheduled for Sunday. The Israelis bombed on Friday. This year, they negotiated in Geneva. The Omani foreign minister came to DC and said, a deal's on the table. Apparently, Jonathan Powell from the UK said there was a deal to be done. Guess what happened? The US and Israel bombed the next day. There's a history of Israel in particular, but also the US, bombing every time we're close to a deal. Every time there's a negotiation in place.
And this is why we just come back to the nuclear point, because I agree with you. It's very clear that there's a difference between the interests of the United States and the war goals of the United States and the war goals and interests of Israel. And Israel's war goals and interests are actually very clear. I'm very unclear as to what the US wants.
Well, if it is the nuclear program, I think we're both unclear, but if it is the nuclear program, I don't think they know. But if it is the nuclear program, this is not the way to do it. Negotiations are the way to solve Israel. There is no, most experts say you cannot bomb away a nuclear program. It's in people's heads. It's scientific expertise. You cannot kill every scientist and academic.
You can destroy the nuclear material.
And then they can years later, they can rebuild facilities and enrich again.
Sure.
And then you're just mowing the lawn, as the Israelis say, go in and bomb every couple of years. But we had a JCPOA. We had a deal that was working. The IAEA said Iran was in compliance with it. Do you know how much enriched uranium they had under the JCPOA? 3.64%. You know how much they have now? 60%. You know, you want to go back to logic. Logic tells me that was a failure to get out of that deal.
I mean, I also don't think there's any huge evidence that negotiations produce nuclear non-proliferation. I just think this is a very...
Come on.
I think it's
the entire history of the post-war era. The Republicans are masters of that. They appeal to our dark demons. They're like, you need to hate that person. You need to be mad at that person. The migrant, the Mexican, the trans kid, right? It works. It's evil genius. It works. The problem for the Democrats or the Labour Party in the UK is they don't have a positive version of that. They don't have a way of actually inspiring people with the same emotional messaging, nor do they have a way of channeling people's anger in the right direction. People are angry. But don't channel that anger towards the undocumented migrant who's not the reason your wages haven't gone up, who's not the reason that, you know, you've been lost your job, even though that's what you're told. Channel it at the people who actually are screwing you over, the people who are getting massive tax cuts from Donald Trump, the people who are not paying their taxes, avoiding taxes, stashing their money offshore, the people who are running big tech companies and screwing over your kids with ridiculous algorithms and nonsense. Channel the anger that way, and I think you'll win.
Look, it's a good point, but also as well, we have to admit that there have been fundamental failings on the left. For instance, the border, having an open border.
There's no open border, Francis. Where's the open border?
Well, Trump has closed it, but before there was an open border.
It wasn't. What's your definition of an open border?
Well, you look...
Millions of illegals coming in.
That doesn't mean it's open. That just means they managed to come in illegally. That just means the border wasn't as secure as you wanted it to be.
Hold on a second.
Open border means I could just walk into America. Nobody could do that.
Well, hold on. If millions of people are able to walk into my house and I say, I've got an open door policy to my house, you go, that's not an open door policy. It just means people got in. I mean, come on.
No, I'm being very serious. If you want to use your house analogy, if you opened your house door and said, everyone come in, no, I'm not going to stop you, then fine, that is an open door policy. If people come into your house in the window in the middle of the night while you're calling the police...
That you left open.
Well, did they leave open?
Well, clearly, because the moment Donald Trump was elected, he closed the window.
Well, he closed it completely, which is ridiculous, because now you can't even claim asylum, which is a legal right. You tell me that there was an open border. I would say Tony Blair spent his whole life being hawkish on border. He gave asylum seekers vouchers. I spent most of the 2000s attacking Blair for being cruel to asylum seekers. Gordon Brown talked about British jobs for British workers. People say you sound like Nick Griffin, if you remember 2010. And then, for example, here in the US, Biden and Harris were way to the right of me on the border. Kamala Harris said, do not come. She went to Central America and said, do not come. Doesn't sound like someone with their door open to me.
But they did leave the door
That's a separate argument. But she
went in practice,
you can't have the analogy which said, okay, so in practice, people got in. I've never disputed that. Your argument was you opened the door and said, come in. There's no evidence.
My argument is the fact that people at one point were not able to come in and then they were is evidence of a shift in policy. Is that a fair claim?
I don't know about its policy, because the Biden administration did copy a lot of Trump policies. For example, they got rid of Remain in Mexico, whereby Trump took people and said, you've got to go to Mexico and make a claim. You can't do it here.
Right.
He got rid of that. People said, oh, because of that, the numbers went up. I don't agree with that. I think the numbers were coming.
But why did the numbers go up?
I told you, because there were push and pull factors. The economy was opening up. Let me finish the sentence. The economy was opening up after COVID. The US economy, despite Trump's claims, was amazing on Biden's watch in terms of growth and jobs, record jobs growth. So when you have record jobs growth, people come for work. You need people from abroad, legal immigration. And number two, there was a lot going on in the Northern Triangle, in a lot of these Central American countries, a lot of crises, some crises that we've caused, with people coming in. So there were many, many factors. Was it also liberal bias? Maybe. But this idea that, the left, you said the woke, want virtue signals to be, everyone's an asylum seeker.
I didn't say virtue signal.
Okay, but the implication being they want to look good by saying everyone's an asylum seeker, no one's illegal.
No, that wasn't my implication. You feel free to answer once I just address this. It's not an implication thing. I think it's a change of worldview that happened. People changed how they thought about this issue.
On the ground, maybe. I wish it changed in government. This is what's amusing me listening to you guys. I wish these people existed in power. They don't. Joe Biden wasn't that person. Hillary Clinton wasn't that person. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown weren't those people. Keir Starmer is not that person. Keir Starmer and Shabana Mahmood are to the right of David Cameron in many ways on this issue.
They talk like they are.
Well, talking's bad because it has effects on the public and on our discourse. So I wish these people existed that you're telling me exist. Yes, there are people on the left who I know and I'm part of who did take a much more open borders stance, who did say, actually, a lot of these people are asylum seekers and you shouldn't demonize them all. I'm not sure I saw that in policy or in government. I wish, maybe I missed it, but I didn't see Joe Biden make the case emotionally for refugees and asylum seekers during his administration. The people who invented suicide bombings were not Muslim. The Tamil Tigers perfected it as a mass weapon, right? That was people who believed they were under occupation by Sinhalese, right? So and Robert Pape, who is an expert on suicide terrorism, has talked about this. There's a clear link between foreign occupations and foreign wars and suicide terrorism, in particular suicide terrorism. But look, is there a problem where certain Muslim groups are exploiting political conflicts? Yes, I spent 20 years opposing jihadists and Islamists and pointing out that there is no justification in Islam for this kind of violence. But, explaining something is not the same as justifying it. I don't justify what they do. I think it's reprehensible. But I understand how they work and the mindsets and how they, and this guy in Michigan is an example of that. I don't agree with what he did. He's probably mentally unbalanced. But, people say, well, what would you do if you lost your family? Well, I wouldn't go attack a synagogue. But that's people act in an unhinged way after tragedies happen in their lives. That's not to justify it. Is it going to get worse? I hope not, but, again, violence begets violence. We've seen that in Palestine. We've seen that with Hamas, right? Who knows what's going to come out of Gaza?
But isn't that the exact logic that justifies America bombing the shit out of Afghanistan after 9/11?
It doesn't justify it, but it explains it.
Right.
It does. I mean, so if you ask me, why did America bomb Afghanistan? I wouldn't come up with I wouldn't say it's for the Bible or Christianity. I would say They did it because they got attacked and they wanted to attack back and make a show of force and do whatever they want to do. Doesn't mean I justify it. I didn't agree with the war in Afghanistan, but I understand it. What we refuse to do with our opponents and our enemies, especially the Muslim ones, is try and understand the mindset. We don't try and understand why Iran's doing what it's doing, why Hamas is doing what it's doing, why Hezbollah is doing. You don't have to agree with it, but they're not all crazy people. They actually have their own strategy. And but some people suggest, oh, they're all just messianic people. You did say, Konstantin, so I'm going to bring this up because I watched you on Rogan. You did say on Rogan, oh, well, my Iranian guests tell me there's a 12-ish Shia Islam and they're messianic and they want to bring about the end of the world. That's not true. I'm a Shia Muslim. I'm telling you, Shia Muslim is not messianic. I mean, it is messianic in that we expect a Messiah to come just like Christians, a Mahdi. But there's no evidence that Shias in Iran are trying to bring about the end of the world and that's why they want nuclear weapons. So that kind of thinking is not helpful.
I was quoting specific people.
Yeah, and they're wrong, I'm telling you.
Well, they're wrong. I'm only quoting them. And I think I made it clear that some people say that. I'm not...
Yeah.
I mean, I think we had this conversation with someone else the other day. I'm not convinced of this idea that they want nuclear weapons and the first nuclear weapon they get, they're going to drop it on television.
Insane.
I'm not convinced about that. I think there are some people...
By the way, Israel has nukes. Can I just remind, we haven't said that in this whole conversation.
Well,
Israel illegally has nukes.
You keep throwing stuff in that's not
No, but it's relevant
related.
to the conversation. It is relevant. Come on, we spent an hour, half of the talk about Iran's nuclear program.
Mehdi,
I forgot to point out to the viewers,
Mehdi,
Israel has nukes.
Mehdi, when we had Yossi Cohen, who was the former head of Mossad, I literally made a joke which exposed the fact that Israel has nukes. Of course, Israel, everyone knows Israel has nukes. No one denies it here, right? But what we've done here is we've derailed the conversation.
Let's start with the border argument, because it's actually a clean example of two people arguing past each other over definitions rather than facts. Kisin's claim was that there was effectively an open border under the previous administration. Mehdi's pushback wasn't that illegal crossings didn't happen. He never disputed that. His point was that open implies a deliberate policy of non-enforcement. And what actually happened was large numbers of people crossing illegally despite enforcement existing, which is a different claim. That's a fair distinction to draw, and it's worth separating the border wasn't as secure as some wanted from there was a policy of letting anyone in, because those lead to very different conclusions about what policy fix is actually needed. On the specific numbers cited at the end, a claim that border encounters hit a 56-year low in fiscal year 2025 and apprehensions dropped over 80% from their peak. Those are the kind of specific, checkable government statistics worth verifying against actual CBP data rather than taking from any single commentary source, mine included. If accurate, they'd support Mehdi's framing. If you're going to cite them in an argument yourself, look them up directly. Now, there is a lobby section, which is where this got genuinely tense. Mehdi's argument was careful in a way that's easy to miss if you're not listening closely. He wasn't claiming foreign control of American politicians. He was making a comparison to other domestic lobbies, the gun lobby, agricultural lobbies, and arguing that a pro-Israel lobby operates with similar mechanics but gets treated as untouchable to criticize because of the risk of being called anti-Semitic. Kisin's response, that lots of Americans support Israel for religious or strategic reasons independent of any lobbying effort, is also a fair point. And to be clear, both of those things can be true simultaneously. As Mehdi himself acknowledged, genuine grassroots support and organized lobbying influence aren't mutually exclusive explanations. The specific dollar figure Mehdi cited, around $45 million spent by AIPAC in the 2024 cycle to defeat two progressive candidates, is a specific, reportable number, and it's exactly the kind of claim worth checking against FEC filings and campaign finance reporting directly rather than accepting secondhand. If it's accurate, it's a legitimate data point about lobbying scale. If you're building an argument on it, verify it yourself first. Where I think the conversation was most honest was the moment discussing understanding versus justifying violence, whether it's Islamist terrorism or a lone attacker's actions, both Mehdi and Kisin actually converge there, agreeing that explaining the psychological or political roots of violence isn't the same as excusing it. That's a distinction worth holding on to in any conversation about political violence, regardless of which group or ideology is being discussed. So tell me, do you think there's a meaningful difference between open border and under-enforced border, or is that just semantics? And on the lobbying question, does treating the Israel lobby with more caution than other lobbies make sense, given the history involved, or is that itself the double standard Mehdi is pointing to? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more of these fact by fact breakdowns, get subscribed, because that's exactly what this channel is built for.